Hello, and welcome to UDL in 15 minutes, where educators discuss their experiences with UDL. I'm Loui Lord Nelson, UDL author and leader. Today, I'm talking with Marijke Welten, a consultant with Hordes and Klaasdraf, which focuses on inclusive education and learner agency. She is also a teacher at Utrecht University of Applied Science. Marijke is going to share a tool she uses to gather the thoughts and dreams of learners and how teachers can apply that information. Hello, Marijke.
Hello, Louie, and thank you so much for having me. And I'm looking forward to share my experiences and in this 15-minute talk. And I hope you're doing well at the other end of the Atlantic.
I am. Thank you so much. And the same to you. Thank you for being here. I'm
Pleasure.
excited for you to share your insights and experiences with this specific tool. But before you share that tool,
Mhm.
can you share why you and your colleague created the tool?
Yes, of course. Well, actually, I didn't create it. My colleagues and I have adjusted it for education because the tool already exists for a long time in the tradition of person-driven planning. That's for listeners who don't know what that is. That's a way of working with people that maximizes their agency. And it is normally used when persons with extra needs are going through transitions, right? Like, for instance, from school to another school, or from school to work, or from living with their parents to having a place of their own. And usually it's used to form meetings to create a positive perspective on future and to maximize the agency of the person in the process of getting there. So usually they organize meetings where friends and families and other people from the support system gather to hear the person out and to help to create opportunities. But, well, it may be important to know that I've been working with UDL for years now and in all kinds of ways. And what I experience, and that is why I really wanted to share this with you, was that I presumed that I knew what barriers students could face. But what I've learned during my years in secondary education is that students' perspectives and their motivations and their inner motives and their dreams and also determine what they will experience as barriers. And on top of that, I experienced that it's hard for students to make choices and to know what motivates them and, well, what their interests really are and in what ways they could optimize their learning process and how they can show what they've learned. So my thought was that every student, with or without disabilities or what we call the extra needs, well, I should say different needs, I think every student has to be given the opportunity to explore streams and inner motives and possibilities and qualities and that kind of stuff and their support network in order to make optimal use of UDL environments. So that's why we adjusted the already existing tool of the one-page profile into a my personal profile for all students and all kids at school.
Oh, I think that's wonderful. And do you know, so I've always been introduced to it within the realm of person-centered planning.
Right.
And yes, was introduced to that. Oh my gosh. Well, this will speak some of my age. So anyway,
No, but
about
I mean, the
yeah, 30 years
person-centered
ago.
planning is talking about people, and
Yes,
it evolved in person-driven planning, right? In talking
yes,
with people, like what the UN says, declaration says, nothing about us without us.
yes, exactly, exactly. And I think it's a wonderful method and tool to have brought into and to help others see the alignment with UDL. So I'm really excited about this conversation. So the podcast, this is listened to by educators in over 120 countries.
Wow.
And we are so unique in our separate settings.
Hmm.
And we know that, but there are overarching issues. And I think you just shared one of them. I mean, all
Hmm.
over the world, there are learners who they don't think their opinions are important or
Right.
valued. So,
Valued. Yeah.
yeah, you created this single page person driven planning tool. So, for my listeners, a link to this tool is on my website with this specific podcast. But, Marijke, would you please talk us through the tool?
Well, the tool that is on your website is like a one-piece paper. That's why it's called one-page profile. Well, if students want to develop a music piece around it, that's of course that could be useful as my personal profile, or a drawing or whatever. So you don't have to stick to this plan with the paper kind of format, but I'll talk you through it. At the paper, to personalize it, the student can add a photo or another picture which he or she thinks matches his profile. There's an item on qualities and talents. It says what I and other appreciate about myself. And well, we like to do that as a homework assignment, because to collect what other people appreciate about them, the qualities, and ask people like to illustrate or prove that with a situation they remember. And
Mm-hmm.
often, you wouldn't tell, but often it is the first time that the youngsters or the kids talk to people about these positive aspects about themselves.
Mm.
And sometimes they're quite moved what people say about them. Then there's an item, what I dream of or what I really would like. So that's where they vividly try to imagine a vision for the future, like for a positive future perspective. And well, you can inspire them by inviting guests, or I don't know, looking at movies, or just talk about it with the youngsters in your classroom. Then there's an item, this is important to me, where you collect values and interests and choices and preferences and that kind of stuff. And that's what we added in the educational
Mm.
application.
Mm-hmm.
At school, I would therefore like to work on. So if you know what your dreams are and what you find very important, what your values are or preferences, then you can say, okay, I don't want just to work on the learning goals that are set by educators, but I really would like to work on my own goals. And that's
Mm.
important because, well, UDL starts with setting learning goals, right? But y- well, usually we as educators set those goals. And of
Right.
course, that's
Yes.
so important because uh, it means socialization and culture, and they have to learn how to read and write and do math and history. But in a rapidly changing world, we want to learn our students how to set goals for learning and living themselves, don't we? And it's not as if they can do this without practice. It's very
Yeah.
hard for them to tell about it and talk about it with each other. So, and this really seems to be, well, even more important for kids, what we call, well, extra or different needs,
Mm-hmm.
just in order to prevent that, well, the learned helplessness gets them and grabs them, and to become more independent of their parents or caretakers. And so I think it's important that all learners learn to do this. And well, we all use support systems, don't we? And this is a way of thinking and implementing person driven planning by the one page profile. And it will reduce the stigma on what schools still call learners with extra needs. And then there's an item, what can help me achieve my goals? So that's where the resources, the tools, the devices, the audio support, the sign language, the you name it, the graphics, the whatever student think they need to achieve the goals set by the educators, but also to achieve their own goals. And they can also fill in who can support me with this, like the mentor or role model or somebody from the support system. Let me stress that classmates are one of the best supporters in your
Mm-hmm.
network. So don't forget them.
Right.
And then the last item is things that work for me, like needs and preferences, motivating factors, things that support well being, and here you are, things that don't work for me, like
Yeah.
things that might get in the way. Well, there's a resemblance with barriers, right? That frustrates or frighten me. But these barriers are barriers that are expressed by the learners themselves instead of presumed by us.
Yes.
So
Mm.
that's a huge difference.
It's a huge difference. You're exactly right. And it's really helping our learners take ownership of thinking about who they are within different contexts and what kind of supports that, yeah, they would like to have within those settings, and to get them thinking about that. That's such a
Hmm. Hmm.
strengths based attitude. And I think that
Right.
that's going to impact, how listeners interpret this piece. You're talking through that. So I appreciate that. And you've had a lot of experience helping educators apply this tool. And
Mm.
I think, though, there are lots of educators who are good at having students fill out interest surveys. That may be how somebody would interpret this. And I think that's minimizing it. But anyway, they're good at having students fill these surveys out or even a similar type of tool, but they don't know what to do next. So
Hmm.
could you offer some suggestions and maybe wrap that into a specific story about how this
Hmm.
process has positively impacted a learner?
Right. Well, first of all, the personal profiles provide you with vital information, right, on the student for team meetings and talks with parents and colleagues and that kind of stuff. And since the students are in the driver's seat when making the MPP, it provides you with information on how to support their agency. But also, if you want to start with UDL, it's a lot of work. So you have to start small, right? Start with a plus one strategy. You can discuss what would be a good starting point with your students, given their MPPs, right? So,
Mm,
sharing stories and dreams and needs will form a strong story class where having needs is normal and where you just share information and well, they are co-researchers, right? In what would
mm,
be a strong plus one strategy. So that is when you start with UDL. Well, you see in the pictures that I provided you with, you can use the one page profile as a format for speed dates with your teachers. So,
mm, mhm,
yeah, you can talk with them on different subjects. How you could, they could share, you could share your ambitions on a subject, and together with your teacher, find out what your options are to work on that in class. For instance, one student wanted to live in America in the future. He knew that already, and he wanted to practice on the American pronunciation. So it's very motivating for him and it's helping him. But you can also use my personal profiles to explore different kinds of evaluation. In one
mm,
of the pictures you see, and that was an idea of my students after we'd worked on MPPs in a couple of weeks, they wanted to work on an exhibition instead of a boring test that
yeah.
contained historical objects and photographs. And well, there was this one guy whose MPP showed that he couldn't and wouldn't join that process, and he just took a test. But he also wanted to be a tour guide in the exhibition and stretch his comfort zone in doing
Oh,
so. So we've used MPPs in creative project. We've used them as a kind of curriculum vitae to support students in choosing a study program that would really fit them. We've used them in choosing internships. We've used them as invite guests in your classrooms
mm,
that match the interest of your students very well. So also for primary schools, right? They use it for
mhm,
many creative projects and for designing the learning environment. Because when you learn your pupils to think like this in terms of dreams and motivations and qualities and strengths, you create a mindset with your students that really stresses and support their agency. And as an educator, you design the learning environment together with them. So you're co-creators and co-researchers on UDL. And then your UDL is truly universal, right? So
exactly.
I think PDP, when you start with UDL, PDP really informs you. It enables you to know the real barriers. And if you have a lot of experience with UDL, it deepens your work because it gives you an opportunity to advocate for every single kid in your classroom. So, well, I don't know whether we have a minute, but there's one story I would like to tell you about a student of mine, Noah. And she was in literature class with a colleague of mine, and she was so mad because she has spasms. My colleague said, okay, you know what, don't do the presentation in front of the class. That would be a huge barrier for you, so you'd better do the written assignment because that's an option as well. But Noah, her dream was to be a sports commentator, but she really had problems with her voice. And well, then she entered my theatre program, and I had looked into her MPP and understood why she got that upset with the teacher, removing what the teacher thought would be a barrier. But
Mhm,
Noah was utterly smart, and her problem was that she made these long, eloquent sentences and that her muscles and vocal cords just couldn't handle. So we practice on shortening the sentences and taking pauses and on communicating with her audience to just bear with her, that it might look as if she was dying, but that she never did. And it was important to her to practice the speaking. Apart from her parents being moved at theatre, because the MPP was her starting point and not my assumptions, right, about what could be barriers in her learning process, she also entered mainstream Goethe-Deutsch classes and Cambridge English classes to practice speaking.
Mm.
So it was not a barrier as we would all have expected. It was her challenge. And nowadays she's in university studying communication, and she just finished an internship with a sports company. So it gave her
Just
skills and evidence to show what was important to her and what really worked for them. I think that's why I think person-driven planning with tools like a one-page profile or an MPP and my personal profile is such a powerful way of working with UDL, because it
yeah.
enables students to broaden our beliefs on what barriers are, right? And
Exactly. Yes, it's really cracked open another conversation that we can't have during this podcast, but I think we need to have in the future, which is that interpretation of barriers. And you've started the conversation that as adults, when we're doing the planning ahead of time, because of course, when we're using universal design for learning, we are thinking about the
hmm
barriers that our
hmm
learners might experience. And so we're working to remove those barriers. But when we get to this individual level, and when we remove what we think removing barriers, but it's actually what we're doing is self-serving. We're removing a barrier that feels uncomfortable to
to
us
us, right?
and may not,
Right.
and then we have a learner who's saying, no, this is part of my goal is to work on this. So, oh,
Yes.
Marijke, we have to talk again. So,
No problem, Louis. No problem.
oh, yes, we do. Yes, we do. But we have reached the end of this particular podcast, and this has been so lovely. And I really hope that people do go out and look at the tool and go back to this podcast and listen again and again to the different examples that you gave of how this information can be used, but then also to listen to this story of Noah again and again and to pull out the nuances and to really
hmm
do some self-examination of when you're thinking about those barriers. Where are those placed in your mind? Are they making you uncomfortable, or is this
Yes.
something that really is getting in the way of a student being a successful learner and achieving the goal? So, oh, how
If
exciting.
that's what you concluded from, well, me showing what I do, I think you just nailed it. It was lovely to be, yeah, well, to share this with you.
Oh, thank you so much, Marijke. I really, really appreciate it. And so, for those who are listening to this podcast, you can find supplemental materials like the image montage with closed captioning, a transcript, and an associated blog at my website, which is the udlapproach.com/podcasts. And finally, if you have a story to share about UDL implementation for UDL in 15 minutes, you can contact me through the udlapproach.com. And thanks to everyone for your work in revolutionizing education through UDL and making it our goal to support learner agency.